Hi, thank you for joining me for another Facebook Live Friday. This is part of the web prep checklist series that I've been doing. And now we are on step number 6, your brand basics in terms of visuals. Here is what we're going to cover today. I want to talk about why Facebook isn't the answer for crowdsourcing your design feedback, the 3 parts to an effective and timeless logo, how to design a wordmark logo, and I'm going to actually share my screen and walk you through the step-by-step tutorial on that, the easiest way to pick your colors, and then choosing and using fonts on your website. If you haven't yet grabbed the checklist, that's an overview of this entire process. You can get that for free at craftingcreative.com/checklist. This will also get you on my email list where I share exclusive tips and tutorials. And if we haven't met, hey, I'm Megan. I am the designer behind craftingcreative.com, where I work with female creative entrepreneurs to craft their websites in a way that bring them more consistent client inquiries with less marketing and hustling. On to the first mistake that I see is that people are crowdsourcing their logo designs in Facebook, and they're doing it without context, which is really a big no-no. So the reason why this doesn't work effectively: number 1, they are not necessarily in your target audience, and they might not know who exactly your target audience is, so they can't even step into that role and give you their opinion based on that. Number 2, you're providing little to no context about your brand or your business objectives. And number 3, you're asking them to judge it based on aesthetics over effectiveness. But when you provide context for your design, then you're able to measure the effectiveness over the aesthetics. And by context, I mean you're letting them know where this design will be placed and what the intended purpose of the design is, what's your objective, and then who is the intended audience, who do you intend to interact with. Now, let's talk about how to actually design logos. So apart from being effective in terms of your business objectives, you also want to think about the effectiveness in terms of, will it stand the test of time? So as your business grows, will your logo grow with you? Now, there are 3 main pillars to a timeless logo design. So number 1, it is simple. You don't need a lot of colors, a lot of fonts, or even an icon or a graphic element to it at all. It could be a simple text-based logo, something like Sony. Monochrome, meaning it looks good in a single color. Even if you are going to utilize 2 colors, or have it in a bold, bright color, it should also look good in black or gray or white. And then lastly, it's scalable. So even if I blow it up to massive poster size proportions, or I squeeze it down to an itty bitty 50 pixel size, it should still look good and be recognizable as your brand. Now, I want you to grab your mood board that we did in lesson number 5, your mood board and your tone words that we defined, because we're going to use those right now in these future exercises. So if you haven't done that and you're watching the replay, go ahead and pause this, go back to lesson number 5 where we talked about how to define your brand values and tone words and how to create a mood board. Once you've done that, come back and we'll be ready to design your logo, colors, and fonts. Before we get into the design, I want you to go through these 4 reflection questions. These are really going to help you decide on a design spectrum what you're looking for. So it's going to help your eye identify it when you see it because you've defined what it is you're looking for. So what you can do is take a piece of paper and draw 4 horizontal lines. On the first line, on the left, you're going to write bold, and on the right, subdued. The second line, you'll write contemporary on the left, and on the right, retro. The third will be calm and chaotic, and the 4th, refined and organic. Then what you're going to do is, considering your mood board and tone words that we have, you're going to draw a little X or circle on the spot of that spectrum between bold and subdued where these images and words fit in. So for mine, it's going to be much more to the bold end of the spectrum rather than subdued. And then you'll do the same thing. Is it more contemporary or more retro? So I see mine as more contemporary, more edgy. And then is it more calm or chaotic? And then is it more refined or organic? So while I do have some refined elements here in this mood board, I think it leans slightly toward the organic end of that spectrum. So now I know when we go into this next section that I'm going to be looking for bold, contemporary, chaotic, and organic, specifically in terms of fonts, because that's what we're going to be looking at. So once you've gone through and answered these reflection questions and defined your spectrums, it's going to make it a lot easier to make those design decisions moving forward. Can't talk today. Okay, so now I want to share my screen with you, and we're actually going to walk through the tutorial of how to design your wordmark logo. First, I want you to go to Google Chrome or whatever browser is your preferred one. Go to wordmark.it. This is a free website that allows you to input a word or phrase, and it will then display that word or phrase in all of the available fonts that you have on your local machine. So I'm going to use my own brand name. Okay, so I type that in and just hit return or enter. Now it's going to display this phrase, Crafting Creative, in all of the fonts that I have on my local computer. And again, what I'm looking for when I'm going through this are fonts that stand out as being bold and contemporary or more chaotic and organic. So right now I see this one, and to me that looks more like chaotic and organic. So I just click it once to select it, and then I'll keep going. I see this one over here, and that looks very bold and contemporary to me. So I click that once, and I keep going. Just quickly browsing, I have a lot of fonts, so this could take a lot of time, but I'm just going to quickly go through. This one, again, looks more bold and contemporary. So does this one. And I find some that look very organic, like this one, for instance, but it doesn't come across as bold, and it's also difficult to read, so that's something that you need to consider as well when choosing fonts. This one to me looks contemporary and kind of chaotic, so I like that one. And just going through, maybe I'll choose one more, this one. So once you've chosen some fonts, try to not choose a ton of them because it's going to make it more difficult later. I've chosen about 6 here. So in the top right corner, we'll just click Filter Selected, and then click Save Image, and that will automatically save this as a PNG to my Downloads folder. So then I can grab that and bring it into my design app of choosing, which would be Sketch. I love Sketch because it's intuitive, easy to use, and it's just a one-time fee rather than like Adobe, which is a monthly subscription. So now you should be seeing my screen in Sketch where I've brought in those fonts that I previously selected from wordmark.it. And now what I want to do, I'll type T for the text tool, and then I'll just type in crafting, the first word in my brand name. I'm going to make a copy of that by holding down Option, clicking and dragging, and then releasing. I'm going to do that one more time. Now for this middle one, I'll go to Text, Transformation. I want that to be uppercase. This one, I want to see what it looks like lowercase, so Text Transformation lowercase. I'm going to select all 3 of these, hold down again Option, and actually Option Shift, click and drag. Okay, now I'm just going to type in here the creative portion. The reason I like to do this is because you don't really know right away, or at least I don't, if I want it to be all caps or all lowercase or capital camel case. So by doing it this way, I just get to see all 3. Then I'm going to take a look at the fonts I selected. So right away I can see that this one called Big John and this one called Arca Majora are quite similar, with the one just being more bold. And based on the other fonts that I've chosen, I think I'm going to right away just narrow it down by cutting out that Big John. I want to see it Arca Majora. So I'm going to click, actually I'll select all 3 of these, go to typeface, and just start typing. And I can select it there. If there were different weights to the font, I could select them here, but this one just has one. And you can see that regardless if I have it in capital letters or lowercase, it only comes across in all caps. So that's the only option I have with this font. So maybe I'll try Bevas Nu, the second one there. So I start typing that in and I select it. And again, this one comes only in capital letters, but I do have some more weights that I can play with here. But I think the bold one works best for my brand since I already defined that it's more bold and contemporary. Okay, let's play with some more organic and chaotic ones. So I'll try the first one there, against. And this one also doesn't have a lot of difference between the upper and lowercase letters. They're basically the same. And it only comes in one font weight. Now what I'm noticing here is that I do like this font, but it's a bit difficult to read. So let's try another one, the bold brush one. And this one is also all the same regardless of capital or lowercase letters. And only comes in one font weight also, but I really like and I'm starting to enjoy the way that these two come together. So I can see that as being one option for my logo. So now I'm going to leave one of these like that because I like the way that looks. Now here, let me try this last organic looking font. It's called Dope Script. This one doesn't look great in all capitals because it's difficult to read. So let me just go up to text, transformation, and say none. So now it's still a little bit difficult to read, but it does look kind of cool like that. So that's an idea I could play with. And in the all lowercase letters, I don't know that I'm really digging that. But I think this top option is the one that I'm going to go with for my logo. So you can see just by selecting a few fonts that match our criteria that we defined based on our mood board, and then bringing them into our design app, that we're able to play around with combining those two fonts so you can see which one works best. Now, you can just do one font also. You don't need to combine two like I am doing. You could just find one, like maybe I want to use this bold brush font, and I like that, and that looks great. But if you want to combine two, this is how you can do that. Alright, so let's jump back into the slides. Now that we've gotten our logo designed, let's talk about colors. So it's actually a lot easier than you think to choose a color palette. You can easily source it from your mood board, and really you only need 4 colors. So the 4 colors that I'm talking about are a light color, a dark color, your main brand color, and then an accent color. Now that accent color is going to be roughly complementary to your main color in terms of the color wheel. It doesn't need to be the exact opposite on the color wheel because sometimes that might turn out to be like a gross poo color, but it would be like in the same color family. So here's an example from chroma.co, which is a cool little website where you can input some color preferences and it will generate these 2 color palettes for you to look through. So in this example, it's a shade of blue and a shade of orange, which are complementary colors, but it's not necessarily the exact complement if I were looking at those colors on the color wheel, if that makes sense. We've got our 4 color palette, we've gotten our logo. Now I want to talk about the easy 2 font formula that I use for websites. Really, when it comes to designing your brand visuals, when you're doing it on your own, less is more. Keeping it simple, it's going to be more classy, it's going to look more professional. So I almost always use only 2 fonts on a website. The first one will be slightly more stylized, and that will be used for headings, because those are generally shorter and larger, so it's still easy to read. And then the second font I will use for the body text, and that's going to be a highly readable font that goes well with that heading font. Here's an example of how that 2 font formula might play out. So I might use like Laura in bold and italic and then use it in its regular version for the body text. Or I might use something like Railway, which is slightly stylized sans serif, and then use something more traditional for the body text. So you can see that the headlines can be more bold and I can play a little bit more with them stylistically, but then for the body text column, those are all very simple and easy to read fonts. Because your fonts should contribute to your brand vibe and your brand aesthetic, but the way to measure a font's effectiveness is that it is readable. Because that's what we're doing here. We're trying to craft websites that are very user-friendly, and that means reducing the friction and making sure that our sites are easy to use and peruse so that we can attract more of our dream clients consistently. Now, when you are choosing your fonts, there are a number of different sizes that you're going to want to consider. So first, the headings. Headings 1, 2, and 3. Those are predefined in Squarespace. You could go all the way from heading 1 to heading 6 if you want, but generally I stop around to heading 4. Paragraphs, which are called normal in Squarespace, and then quotes and testimonials. Your navigation, both in the header and the footer, and then your buttons or call to action links. Now, when it comes to your fonts, it's not just about choosing the font itself, but about thinking about how it's going to play out on the page. So we want to make sure that we take into consideration the hierarchy so that we can move our users through the page toward a call to action. And this is done by keeping your heading 1 as the largest font. Your heading 2 will be slightly smaller, then your heading 3, and then your paragraph text. Now, for the paragraph text, anything between 16 and 20 pixels is great. You don't want to go less than 16 pixels because it's going to be difficult to read at that size. And an easy mathematical way that you can do this is to start with your base paragraph font size. So we'll say 16 pixels. And then to get to your heading 3, you'll just take that and multiply it by 1.5. So your heading 3 would then be 24 pixels. And to get to your heading 2, you would just take that and multiply it by 1.5. So that would be 36 pixels. And then your heading 1 would be 54 pixels. So you can tweak it a little bit from there, but that's a good overall rule of thumb when it comes to your typographic hierarchy. Also, consider about how you're going to display the text on your page. So I like to call this chunking because we're chunking up the page into readable sections using headers and lines or boxes, in this case like Jasmine is. So it just takes a big wall of text and breaks it up so that it's easy for people to read and scan so they don't get stuck. And then lastly, make sure that you give room for white space. So this refers to the padding between elements as well as the spacing above and below paragraphs or elements on your page. So you can think of it as like the breathing room for your content. You're just giving your readers space and time to process what they've read so they don't feel overwhelmed and they can continue moving forward. So today we covered a lot. We went through feedback faux pas and why I don't recommend just asking for logo design feedback in the Facebook groups. We talked about logo lessons, what makes for a timeless logo, and actually how to design one yourself. With the DIY design tutorial, we talked about color clarity and why I recommend just having a simple 4-color palette. And then finally, we covered my 2-font formula for how to select fonts to use on your website. And this was step 6 of the web prep checklist. So first we went over in the introductory section that's not on this list, I covered how to use your website to get consistent client inquiries. And then the first step was defining your business objectives and why I don't recommend SMART goals. And we talked about ideal client research and what to do instead of surveying your audience. In step 3, we talked about uncovering your competitive edge and defining your positioning statement. In step 4, that's when we did the mood board. So it was actually lesson 5, but it was step 4. Then last week we went over copywriting formulas and how I both lay out and write copy for my web pages. And then today was all about logos, colors, and fonts. So next week I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set up your own selfie photo shoot so that you can get professional quality photos for your website and you don't need to hire a professional photographer. If you haven't yet grabbed the checklist, get that from craftingcreative.com/checklist. I will be sending you more goodies to follow if you're on my list. And then as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to go through and answer anything and point you to other resources that might be helpful for you if you're getting stuck in any one area. So I hope you enjoyed this. I can't wait to see you next week to wrap up this web prep checklist series. And thank you again for joining me. Have a great day.